Then, Lloyd showed a smile full of satisfaction and turned to his brother with a curious look. "What's the matter with you?" he asked, feigning concern. "Why didn't you hand over the medal?" His tone was laced with sarcasm as he probed further. "Was that whole story about your medals just a bunch of lies?" he added, his voice filled with mockery. The second prince, delighting in the opportunity to provoke Raleigh, asked about the fate of the supposedly honest man who never told a lie. He joked, "Surely you wouldn't lie, right?" With an air of impatience, he insisted, "So, is it true?" This was the 10th time he stretched out his rather ugly little hand, demanding, "Give it to me quickly and teach me." Raleigh, tired of the exchange, finally relented and agreed to teach him. As the prince fumbled in his pocket, Lloyd watched, a trace of surprise shining across his face as he finally saw the medal in real life. He held it in his hands, marveling at its intense glow. Lloyd was absolutely fascinated, describing the medal as amazing. He finally understood what Solia's medal looked like. However, he couldn't resist asking his brother if the medal was fake. Ian was surprised by the second prince's words, and Zara was already starting to get angry. Lloyd quickly urged them not to misinterpret his curiosity. Raleigh listened, scratching his neck thoughtfully. The second son explained that he was only asking because he could not understand how Raleigh had obtained such a medal. Lloyd, exuding arrogance, repeated his disbelief that Raleigh could have been bestowed the honor. Raleigh smiled and called his brother, while Nani, tense and disliking the other prince, watched the exchange. The third prince then suggested that if his brother liked the medal so much, perhaps he could have it. This was far from the answer the second prince expected. He felt his frustration rise, a vein pulsing on his forehead. Lloyd's maid, equally surprised by the suggestion, watched in amazement. Raleigh put on an innocent expression, explaining that he simply thought his brother really liked Lloyd. Lloyd, listening to his brother, was amazed. Despite everything, he felt a strong attraction to the swordsman. Lloyd, with a sly smile, began to ask if Raleigh was really willing to give him the medal. However, he was unable to finish his sentence because Raleigh snatched the medal from his older brother's hands, declaring that if he didn't want it, he certainly didn't need it. Lloyd was once again flabbergasted. Enraged, the second prince grabbed Raleigh by the neck, demanding to know how he dared to mock him. Raleigh, remaining calm, simply called his brother's name. Finny Paletta intervened, telling his second son to stop acting like a clown. Beside him, the beautiful Lady Ares watched the scene unfold. Lloyd released his younger brother, claiming to understand. Madame Iris then approached and gently inquired about Lloyd's well-being. Ignoring the question, he stated her name and asked how her trip had been. Lady Iris, with a sweet and kind smile, replied that everything had gone well and thanked him for his concern. She added that thanks to her prayers, they had reached home without incident. Suddenly, the prince's mother turned to Nain and Iris. I could hear Madame asking Nain about the possibility of joining them on the next trip. Lady Iris shared her joy, expressing how long it had been since her last visit to the kingdom's capital, and was very excited about this journey. Lloyd also smiled, commenting on how wonderful it was that everyone was able to enjoy the trip. She threw her cape over her shoulder with a flourish and declared firmly, "Having fun is all well and good, but there's no excuse for being lazy and neglecting your training." The prince, seeking confirmation, turned to the lady and asked if she was correct. She stated her question, emphasizing that this especially applied to him and his older brother. "Now, more than ever, you need to focus on your future," she advised, not resisting pointing out that some among them seemed uninterested in the heir's responsibilities. Zara and Ian, listening to the conversation, reacted with visible irritation and disgust, their foreheads throbbing with suppressed anger. Nani also heard the second prince's nasty comments and felt a pang of empathy. The prince commented that it would be wise if his little brother avoided seeking his help when he inevitably found himself in trouble. Lloyd's words sent a chill down Nani's spine, his gaze turning deadly as he stared blankly at the second son of the Ipiet family. When Lloyd left, he scoffed, expressing disbelief at how the third prince could have obtained such a medal. "But what can you do?" he muttered under his breath. Nani, watching from afar, felt a surge of anger. He lightly touched his finger, releasing a burst of purple mana that flew towards the prince. Oblivious to the imminent danger, Lloyd, in his arrogance, failed to notice the obstacle in his path. He stumbled and fell painfully to the ground, screaming in pain. The two maids beside him were alarmed and rushed to help him, asking if he was okay. Meanwhile, Nani hid behind a door, silently observing the scene with a sense of satisfaction. Someone in the crowd shouted, mocking the second prince as terribly clumsy, sitting on the floor with a bandage on his head and an expression of extreme indignation. Lloyd began shouting at his brother, insisting that it wasn't his fault. Leon, approaching the scene, tried to calm him down, assuring him that he understood. Lloyd, still furious, could not understand how such an incident had occurred. Now sporting a new cut on his forehead, he shouted that not even a 10-year-old would be that clumsy. Leon, with a knowing look, reminded him that he had had a similar fall when he was 10, although it had happened because he had tripped. Finally, Leon sighed and decided to change the subject, asking about Raleigh's condition. The second prince, now a little calmer, replied that Raleigh was still the same and that nothing had changed. Leon, however, was skeptical and wondered aloud if Raleigh was really the same. Finally, Lloyd remembered that his younger brother had brought a strange woman with him, piquing Leon's interest. He inquired further, and Lloyd confirmed, describing the woman as very unattractive. He noted that the woman's gait and fashion sense suggested that she was not an aristocrat. As Leon considered this information more seriously, he found the situation increasingly strange and dubious. He shared his thoughts with his brother. Lloyd made a joke, commenting that the woman even smelled different, something he had never encountered before. Leon didn't react to the comment, his mind occupied with thoughts about Raleigh and the suspicion that his brother was up to something once again. Finally, he told his brother that a variety of different people were coming to Solia these days, so there was no reason to be surprised by the influx. And in any case, it seemed like Raleigh, the idiot, was up to something shady. The first prince pointed out that he had never seen his younger brother show any real interest in women before. Lloyd, equally surprised, agreed. "You're right," he replied. "He used to spend his days lying in a tree." Leon nodded and commented that this deserved special attention. He instructed his younger brother to keep an eye on Raleigh, just in case. Lloyd wasn't overly eager, but he saw the wisdom in Leon's advice and agreed. Leon added that he was also trying to gather information about the mystery woman. The prince then dismissed his brother. Lloyd stood up without protest, conceding the point to his older brother. Now, Leon was alone in the dimly lit room, illuminated only by the midnight full moon. Deep in thought, he pondered Solia's medal and turned to the window, questioning how his lazy brother had achieved such an honor. That medal, he mused aloud. He didn't even participate in the competition. He just watched from the stands. Frustration boiled inside him as he gritted his teeth. Leon had no idea how or why Raleigh had received the medal, but he was determined to thwart his clumsy plans. Elsewhere, someone was watching Nani, who was wearing an impeccable maid's uniform. "Much better," they commented. "Yes, it's much cleaner than before. Not to mention the saint's clothes." Zera, now raising her index finger instructively, informed them that even if they had chosen her to teach the young master magic, they might not have chosen her. The maid approached the frightened girl and sternly reminded her that she still had tasks to complete. "You understand?" Zera asked assertively. Nani, confused, responded with a hesitant yes. Before leaving, Zera asked if Nani remembered what she had been told before arriving. Embarrassed and polite, Nani replied that Zera had instructed her to take her role seriously. Zera, pleased, recognized Nani's good memory as a positive trait. The maid then warned her that the rules of the Ipiet house were very strict, and Nani would need to forget everything she had learned in Bahazolia. Nani nodded slightly. Zera, with a sly and caustic smile, offered to work together. Nani sighed deeply, feeling her former employer's penetrating gaze. She stood up, irritated but resigned, and accepted. Zera happily turned around, allowing Nani to relax a little. Nani realized that she now seemed to fear Zera more than Beta. Meanwhile, Raleigh, sitting in a chair, asked, "So these two have to do this in their room?" Zera was enjoying the newcomer's antics, but was now focused on establishing order and discipline. Zera, in fact, looked quite terrifying. Raleigh wondered if that was why Zera had smiled so much when they got home. Han didn't answer Raleigh's question and didn't press for an answer either. However, Jan remembered that he had something to discuss with the master. He asked what they should do with the items given by Bishop Rebosa. Referring to the things left by the great Master Astro and later destroyed, Raleigh said that Rebosa called these items trophies. The prince looked disdainfully at the purple cloak he was holding. "I don't even know how to use it," he admitted. The third son simply suggested selling the trash, despite it having been used once by Astro's grandmaster. Ian, with a curious look on his face, asked the prince if he liked the idea. Raleigh, still pondering what to do with the items, finally responded, still uncertain. Behind them, Sarah was instructing Nani on how to handle the heavy and expensive curtains. The girl fumbled a little, her clumsiness evident. Ian assured Raleigh that he would consult someone more experienced about what could be done with the item. As Nani struggled with the curtain, holding them awkwardly in her hands, her mind was full of questions. Alfombra, Zera turned to the master and informed him that they had finished cleaning and were about to leave. Riley acknowledged their report, saying she was fine and praising their work. As the maids left the young master's room, Zera reminded them of proper etiquette. "When you are about to leave, you should say goodbye and bow," she instructed. Someone called Zera. It was the second prince, Lloyd. He nodded in greeting, saying, "There you are." Zera bowed gracefully, but Nani did not do the same. She stared straight ahead, her expression neutral. Zera, noticing this, discreetly tilted her head and whispered to Nani, warning her about the prince's notorious temper. Nani stood tense and serious, clearly uncomfortable and not liking Lloyd. Zera whispered a warning to keep a neutral expression, as any sign of disdain would be noticed. The second prince, less courteous to Nani, asked if she was the same girl Riley had brought last time. Nani confirmed discreetly, explaining that she was being introduced to the house and its responsibilities. Seda asked why she was there. Lloyd here intervened, downplaying the matter, saying he just wanted to ask him something. He then asked Nani's name. Ta, briefly pronouncing his name, kept his gaze steady without looking at the ground. Lloyd approved and expressed his desire to talk to her. He mentioned that it was Riley's first time bringing someone into the house, and he was curious about his younger brother's choice. Nani found his comments distasteful. The second prince approached Nani and asked if she knew how Riley had won the medal. Nani rolled her eyes, not understanding why this idiot kept talking bad about her master. Lloyd, with a tight smile, pressed her for an answer. As he spoke, Nani discreetly assessed the amount of mana he possessed. Zara, realizing the direction of the situation, felt compelled to intervene. However, Nani was only focused on the fact that this second son only possessed a fraction of the Lord's strength. Zara intervened, stating that she wasn't finished training Nani yet. But Lloyd also ignored her, focusing on Nani. The prince's posture changed from cordial to stern. Lloyd heard everything, the veins on his forehead visibly pulsing with anger. Nani finally spoke, stating that Mr. Riley had brought her here. Something seemed to metaphorically explode behind her words, and she sounded both confident and furious. Lloyd, surprised by his audacity, tried to maintain his composure. However, the tension in the room was palpable. The exchange clearly affected everyone, leaving a lingering sense of unrest and unresolved conflict. The atmosphere filled the room with a distinct aroma as the girl finally finished her task. The prince, feeling a mixture of anxiety and frustration, smiled nervously and complained that he was losing control. He asked her to repeat what she had just said, his voice tinged with irritation. "What the hell else did you say?" he demanded. Nani, being short, looked up at him, but her serious posture remained unshakable, his eyes fixed on the prince's, piercing him with his gaze. Lloyd, enraged, took it out on her. He shouted, demanding to know how she dared look into his eyes, accusing her of losing her mind and calling her derogatory names. Nani, however, attributed her attack to his resistance to her magic. Meanwhile, Lloyd slept peacefully on the elegant rug, oblivious to the chaos. Despite Lloyd's resistance, Nani, a sixth circle mage, was undeterred. Zara stood to the side, speechless, her mouth open as she realized that the Lord had brought an extraordinarily strange person into her home. Zara, on the verge of tears, felt overwhelmed by the situation and didn't know how to deal with it. Nani tried to comfort her, suggesting that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. "We can lay him down," she proposed. "And when he wakes up, he'll think it was just a weird dream." Nani pressed the fold of her skirt and asked Zara if she remembered correctly that a maid's main duty was to serve her master. Zara, confused about where this was going, nodded. Nani then reflected modestly, saying that if she had been there in the past, she would have covered it up with a 3-story word, recalling how she had insulted him in every way. Zara let it go, wondering if she had just sworn. Embarrassed, the girl admitted that she thought she would be reprimanded more than once. Knowing that she would probably be reprimanded for this, Nani continued to make mistakes. She then asked if it was acceptable to use a little magic in this context. Riley emerged from behind the door at that moment. Zara scowled at Nani, and the prince, now alert, asked why Lloyd was sleeping there. Zara, not expecting to see him there, became worried. However, Riley did not demand explanation. He shrugged, asking if they were done and if he could take Nani with him. Zara responded immediately, confirming that the training was indeed over. Unexpectedly for Nani, Riley grabbed her shoulder and pulled her closer. Delighted, Riley commented that this was great and that the time had finally come to practice some magic. The girl was a little surprised by the Lord's behavior. Zara decided to forgive poor Nani this time. They separated, Zara going in one direction while the prince and Nani went in another, continuing their conversation and sharing a laugh. Zara rationalized her own forgiveness by attributing it to Nani's promise to forget her behavior in Solia's nether part. Nani hesitated, then offered to at least make her a cup of tea. Riley looked at her, tiredly refusing. "What kind of tea?" he asked, eyes closed. After all, she was a sorceress. Nani, without looking up, called him a fool and pointed out that despite appearances, she was a servant. Realizing the words that had just escaped, she quickly shrugged and covered her mouth with her hand. Riley also didn't expect to hear such frank words from a maid. He turned to her and sighed deeply, muttering, "Oh, those grumpy sorceresses from Lower Solia." Nani, realizing her mistake, bowed and sincerely apologized. The third prince, deciding to move past the unpleasant moment, commented that he hoped she would quickly learn to speak with more respect and appropriate decorum. In front of them were the objects donated by Master Astroy. The prince asked Nani to come closer and examine them. Thoughtfully, he mentioned that he had analyzed these items closely. Riley messed with the mana or traps on the objects, not knowing if any of them were dangerous. He observed that if there were any traps, he had not seen the magistrate setting them. Nani commented that, during her days in the laboratory, she had seen Astroy wearing his cape, but never a ring or bracelet. She assumed Astroy didn't have these items at the time. Riley placed his hand on the table, displaying a gold bracelet, and said, "That's how it is." He told her that in that case she could keep the items. She mentioned that she had an acquaintance who was knowledgeable about these things and that he would ask her for more information. Nani was surprised by his words, especially about having an acquaintance skilled in magic. She asked why he hadn't studied with this acquaintance before. Riley responded with a question of his own, asking why he needed her. Riley looked at her silently for a moment before explaining that she had reached the sixth circle of magic with the help of medicine and that her magical abilities were exceptional compared to other magicians. Despite this, she wondered why she was the only one chosen. Riley smiled warmly and reassured her that she didn't have to be the only one. This answer left the girl even more intrigued. She murmured, continually asking why. Riley responded that she wanted to be free and that she often trusted people who ended up abandoning her. Once again, Riley reassured her with a happy smile, emphasizing that she didn't need to carry the burden alone. The girl, still perplexed, murmured and asked why once again. Riley gently asked if she was tired of it all yet. The girl crossed her arms defensively. Riley commented that someone thought she was a magical masterpiece, but some considered her completely useless, never taking her feelings into account. He recalled a battle with Riley in which she had bled from her injured eye. Riley mentioned that the more distance he got, the more he felt attached to the people around him. The third prince asked if she had realized that it was not necessary to be useful to be close to others. Nani listened as Riley explained that being a free person meant following your heart. She reflected on her past and the hero of humanity, recognizing that she should remember that too. The prince gently told her that he wanted her to remember this. She explained that her memories were mainly from the past, and that, therefore, she should not get caught up in the reasons for her action, but simply live her life. Finally, she said she didn't need to constantly question why things happened. She just needed to embrace life and her experiences. These words left a deep impression on young Nani. She kept repeating the prince's words about following one's heart. A tear rolled down her cheek as she smiled and said it was the first time she had heard such words. Riley, instead of answering directly, simply said that was why he made his choice. Suddenly, he burst in, calling it a hoax, a contamination, and declaring that, even in the face of death, he would never teach this to anyone. Nani, who had been enchanted by his words, came out of her trance and thoughts. Riley continued to scream, saying that he was already asked to become an apprentice. He added that if someone used any other magic besides the sword, they would become the true embodiment of evil. Riley shouted that this was all heresy. The girl laughed softly and said that was it. Riley, clearly frustrated, complained that he had no interest in the dark arts. He expressed his growing tiredness with the conversation and asked his acquaintance to stop talking. At that moment, Nani regretted interrupting such an emotional moment. The carriage rolled through the forest. Nani informed the prince that he would need a circle if he wanted to use magic. Sitting inside the carriage, Riley asked what the circle was. Nani explained that it was like a ring. If your heart is surrounded by a ring, you have a circle, she said. If you have 6 rings, you are a 6th circle wizard. Riley asked if she meant he had 6 circles. Nani confirmed, explaining that the source of all things was light. Riley agreed, noting that in this world, it made sense. Nani was surprised and asked him if he meant that he was in another world. Riley looked away and denied it, saying he was simply making an observation. Nani explained that this was the basic principle that novice magicians learn. She created a magical ball of light in her palm, demonstrating the fundamental miracle of creating something from nothing. Riley watched his hand closely. Nani continued, explaining that in order to use light magic effectively, they needed to determine their specific talent or specialty. Riley asked what her specialty was, but didn't wait for an answer before asking what she was good at. Nani admitted that there was nothing she was particularly exceptional at, displaying extreme humility. She joked that maybe that was why she was the only person who survived the terrible experiments. Riley wondered if she was now bragging to him and said that if that was the case, he had a question for her. The girl asked what else he wanted to know. Riley mentioned that they still needed to ask about the ring and bracelet. She reminded him that she had talked about her friend before, the one who was knowledgeable about these items. Nani asked if he was referring to his friend who is skilled in magic. Riley confirmed. The prince looked out the window and said that they were almost at their destination, estimating that they would arrive in another 5 minutes. Nani asked if she would have exceptional company, thinking about her arrival. Nani decided that although she didn't have much time, she had her 6th circle and was as skilled as she was. As they approached their destination, the anticipation of meeting the exceptional company filled the carriage. The journey had been enlightening, and both Nani and Riley seemed ready for whatever lay ahead. The carriage stopped, and someone finally announced that they had arrived and that it was time to disembark. Riley exited the transport, and Nani followed. thinking they could now meet the distinguished wizard Riley had spoken of. She felt a mixture of anticipation and seriousness. However, when he saw the person Riley was referring to, his enthusiasm quickly evaporated. Inside the house, Riley shouted, "Yendel, are you wandering around again?" He called for Yendel, asking where he was. Lazily, someone in slippers shuffled out and sleepily remarked, "I've already told you the shop is closed today." He then demanded to know who the idiot was making all that noise, loudly asking if they couldn't read the sign on the door. It was a man with long red hair named Yendel, who stared directly at Riley. In a threatening tone, he asked if Riley still hadn't learned good manners, pointing out that you should only enter a shop when it's open. Riley, half-jokingly, pointed out that Yendel was just waking up when the sun was about to set. Yendel, catching the joke, retorted cheerfully, "Who cares?" and commented that Riley was no longer just a lazy swordsman but a hero. He asked how the hero was doing and if he still carried his medal. Finally, noticing Nani nearby, Yendel asked who she was, speculating she might be the prince's new princess. Riley ignored the question and explained that they wanted to ask Yendel something, which is why they had come to see him together. Meanwhile, Nani was terrified and perplexed by the presence of such a strange creature. Riley explained to Yendel that he had recently been following leads in Solia, where he received some intriguing information whispered to him at the temple. Yendel, now curious, asked what was going on. Nani wondered why this was happening. Riley asked Yendel if he knew what the whispers were about just by looking at him. Yendel, still sleepy, asked what they had said. The prince revealed that, at the temple, he was told he needed to capture a dragon, specifically Yendel. The smile disappeared from Nani's face as she imagined the shadow of a mighty dragon looming behind Yendel. She questioned why a dragon would be there. Riley, apparently amused, asked Yendel if he knew what the temple might be talking about. Yendel showed sudden interest, and the prince repeated that the temple had tasked him with capturing a dragon. This request seemed to entertain the boys, with Riley pointing directly at Yendel and asking if there were more dragons besides him. Yendel, showing his sharp and fearsome teeth, burst into laughter, pounding the table with his fist. His eyes filled with tears from laughing so hard. Nani was surprised and frightened by Yendel's behavior. When Yendel's laughter subsided, Riley confirmed that he was also surprised by the temple's request. Yendel asked if everyone at the temple had gone mad. He then wondered aloud why they had decided to involve the third prince in this matter. Riley admitted he had no idea and asked how he could possibly know. The boy asked Riley what he planned to do now and if he would become a dragon hunter. Riley grimaced in disgust, clearly repulsed by the idea. "No way," he responded, incredulous that Yendel could even suggest such a thing. He also wondered what ridiculous nickname Yendel would come up with next. Yendel, laughing, said they were going to hunt a dragon and advised Riley to stay very quiet so people would think he was simple-minded. Riley asked Yendel to be serious and questioned if there were any other dragons in the area besides him. While preparing a drink, Yendel replied that no, he was the only dragon there. He mentioned that it had been a long time since he had seen any of the other dragons and wondered aloud how many years it had been, estimating around 3,000. Yendel placed 2 glasses in front of his guests, one green and one yellow. Noticing that the girl was hesitant to drink, Yendel assured her that it was non-alcoholic and would not interfere with her tasks. Nani reluctantly agreed to take a sip. Riley, sipping her own cocktail, asked if Yendel would mess up the console by accident. Yendel, slightly offended, asked if he looked like an idiot. Eventually, Nani seemed to enjoy her drink. Yendel, twirling his mustache, pondered aloud what the drink might do for him, noting that it would probably only add to his problem. Suddenly, Yendel approached Nani and warned her, "Maid of Riley, keep your mouth shut." His gaze seemed to burn through her, and Nani realized it was the gaze of a dragon. Sensing her fear, Riley said it was okay to be scared, but reassured her, allowing her to continue looking at him. He then placed Master Asteroid's belongings on the table. "We received these items recently, but we don't know how to use them," he explained. "We came to you for help." Yendel smiled and asked if Riley knew what an inn was, pointing out that they sold alcohol there. Riley, confused, asked what he was talking about, knowing that this place was known as a haven for alcoholics. Yendel, shrinking, commented that there was something about the prince that showed no conscience. He then called Riley an idiot. Riley, slightly irritated, asked if Yendel was refusing to help. Yendel confirmed, but added that he didn't like the third prince's tone. Riley then asked if Yendel would help if asked politely. The dragon remained silent for a moment before nodding. He took the golden bracelet in his hands and asked if there was anything specific to check. Riley, satisfied, said yes. Yendel then asked about the money. The prince laughed and questioned what money had to do with their relationship. Yendel, holding the bracelet, called the prince a shameless thief. In his other hand, Yendel held the magistrate's purple cloak. He continued to curse Riley, calling him a devil and accusing him of being heartless. Nani marveled at the dragon's ability to investigate 3 items simultaneously. Shortly after, Yendel announced that he had finished his assessment and asked where to start. The girl was surprised by his speed and realized that he really was a dragon. Riley, unsurprised by his friend's abilities, instructed him to start with the cover, as that was what interested him most. The dragon examined it and replied that there was nothing special about it, except that, by wearing it, the bearer would be protected from any inclement weather. Nani confirmed. Yes, ensuring that magic is used effectively is always crucial. Yendel extended his arm, revealing the bracelet, and mentioned that it was a kind of storage. Riley intervened, and a large box formed on Yendel's arm. He explained that allowing a bit of magic to enter the bracelet would open a compartment. Riley realized it worked like an inventory. He then asked Yendel what would happen if the bracelet broke. Yendel replied that, naturally, everything inside would be lost, and there would be no way to repair it. Nani, holding the magical bracelet, commented that it was the equipment of a seventh circle smuggler. She marveled at how easily Yendel deciphered its function. Smiling, Yendel reminded her that he was, after all, a dragon. Then, Yendel instructed her to take the ring and put it on. He tossed the ring to Nani, who slid it onto her finger without hesitation. Instantly, mana began to flow from it. Yendel explained that, when worn, the ring absorbed all the mana around. Riley, skeptical, asked if it really absorbed mana. Nani assured him that it was. Riley mentioned that when he had tried before, nothing happened. Yendel chimed in, agreeing and chalking it up to Riley being a unique individual. Nani, perplexed, asked her master what Yendel meant. Yendel teased, asking if Nani didn't realize that her master was a monster. Riley, not wanting to get into it, told Yendel to stop as revealing more wouldn't benefit anyone. The prince then told Nani to keep everything, insisting that he did not need the items. Nani, surprised, said that she could not accept such valuable items. Riley insisted, saying that she should keep them since he had no use for them. Turning to Yendel, the third prince asked if he could measure the volume of mana random. Surprised by the request, Yendel scratched his neck and mentioned that a guardian had recently given him a measuring stone. He asked the prince if he needed her. Yendel laughed, wondering if Riley wanted to use it. He offered the stone to Riley and asked what he would get in return. Riley shook her head, stating that it was for Nani. Nani, confused, did not understand the purpose of this request. Neither does Yendel. He approached Nani, concentrating deeply. Yendel smelled it and declared it unusual, especially focusing on its damaged eye. He noticed that a lot seemed mixed up in this area. Riley speculated if that was why the color of her mana was different. Yendel agreed and asked if this affected all spells. The prince confirmed, explaining that both the flame and ice spells made his mana turn a dark purple hue. Sweat poured down Yendel's face as he proclaimed that Nani was truly one of a kind. Turning to Nani, he told Riley that he had met a very interesting person. Elendale then mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that this girl didn't have long to live. Nani looked shocked and repulsed by this revelation. Riley, intrigued, suggested that Yendel could measure his mana as well. Why not, he added, noticing Yendel's irresistible expression. Riley reminded Yendel that the last time he was there, Yendel told him there was no reason to practice magic. Yendel asked if Riley still felt that way. Riley pounded the table with his fist and retorted, asking if Yendel had fallen from an oak tree and lost consciousness. The boy pondered the reason behind Riley's renewed interest. The prince fell into a thoughtful silence before explaining that he was simply tired of apple picking. Yendel felt disappointed by this answer, and Nani was equally surprised. The dragon swore under his breath, clearly frustrated. Riley approached, placing his palm on the stone, and asked Yendel why it was taking him so long to respond. Nani started to say something thoughtful, and Yendel commented that it had been a long time since he had seen anything like that. Riley wondered aloud if Yendel's meter was faulty. This comment offended Yendel, who shouted back, asking how he dared insult his abilities. Nani, deep in thought, mentioned the concept of time. Riley asked what he meant by that. Nani explained that his quirk was related to time. The prince asked if this was a good thing. Suddenly, the stone began to react. Nani explained that over time, the stone had cracked and deteriorated, succumbing to his influence. Riley asked, "And what does that mean?" Yendel intervened, clarifying that Riley could only use time magic, nothing else. This revelation horrified the third prince. Yendel offered to demonstrate rather than just explain. He summoned fire mana into his hand. Recognizing that fire was not his element, he conjured a normal fireball and then showed what it would look like if Riley used it. The fireball extinguished and spread faintly on the ground. Riley commented that it was like the flame of a match. Nani nodded in agreement. The third prince trembled with disappointment, realizing that his dream of becoming a powerful wizard was unattainable. Yendel persuaded him to abandon this dream. Riley lamented that life would be much better with magic than it ever had been with the internet. Yendel didn't understand what Riley was talking about. Nani, trying to be helpful, mentioned that she learned in the tower that people who mastered time magic often rose to high positions of power. Riley asked if she was joking. Nani sighed and asked if there was any magic that could turn back time. She cheerfully replied no, but but explained that time magic could speed up the ripening of apple, making them ready to eat faster. This did not cheer the disappointed prince. Nani, still excited, clapped her hands and talked about how wonderful it would be to not wait for the next apple season. Riley remained silent for a moment, then quietly commented that she would be the one to collect them. This unexpected humor managed to lighten the mood a little, and although Riley was still disappointed, he couldn't help but smile at Nani's tireless positivity. The girl didn't understand what Riley meant. Riley clarified, "You said you were going to pick the apples." Night had fallen, and darkness enveloped the mansion and the area around it. I pled her. Riley sat at the dinner table, reflecting that, after all, he was nothing extraordinary. He held a magical sphere of light in his hand. Nani watched, but Riley mentioned that the light only lasted half a second. The girl smiled warmly and reassured him that it didn't matter if they couldn't identify his special abilities. She tried to cheer him up, reminding him that Asteroid was dead and he wouldn't need to use as much magic as before. Just then, someone entered the room, announcing that Riley and Nani had arrived. It was Leon, followed by Jorid. The first prince greeted Riley. "Ah, the brothers are here," said Riley. Nani rushed to greet them with a respectful bow. Leon commented that at least they had finally seen his face, noting that he had been around all day. Lloyd asked if the third prince had traveled anywhere interesting. Riley confirmed this, saying that he had spent some time in a leaf village. Lloyd mentioned that Ian and Sarah had stayed at home the entire time and asked if Riley had traveled without a guard. Riley reassured them, pointing to the girl next to him, indicating that she was with him. "With that maiden?" Lloyd asked, surprised. Suddenly, Lady Arras entered, exclaiming how good it was to see everyone together. Riley greeted his mother, who informed him that they had a visitor while he was away. The prince asked who the guest was. Bishop Rebosa appeared next to Lady Arras and greeted the prince. Riley was surprised to see him. The prince wondered if Rebosa had come to see his mother or him. Monsignor Rebosa commented that it had been a long time since they had seen each other and also greeted Nani, bowing and calling her ma'am. Leon and Lloyd were amazed at this unexpected show of respect for a simple servant. Leon asked Lloyd what that was about. Meanwhile, Rebosa had already sat down at the table. Nani bowed and informed that her blankets were ready and that dinner would be served soon. The bishop thanked her, calling her Mrs. Nani. Lloyd politely asked Rebosa why he was showing the maid so much respect. Rebosa realized that the other princes probably didn't know. He asked if Riley had not told them anything. Lloyd, surprised, asked what he meant. Bishop Rebosa turned to Nani, who sighed deeply. Taking this as a sign of agreement, Rebosa began to explain proudly. He announced that last time, Nani and Lord Riley had captured Grandmaster Asteroid and burned him to the ground. He proudly declared that Nani was a sixth circle witch. The first and second princes were speechless. Their jaws dropped and the instruments they were holding slipped from their hands. Lloyd, unable to contain his curiosity, snapped. "How and why?" Leon, more composed, asked why she had become a servant. Nani was visibly displeased with the interrogation. Riley, on the other hand, didn't think revealing her identity was a big deal, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Bishop Rebosa had ulterior motives. Despite his seemingly kind attitude, Riley suspected that Rebosa might ultimately be the villain in this story. It was a classic trope. As they ate, Riley couldn't stop thinking about Rebosa's unexpected visit and his true purpose. He didn't have a specific reason for showing up at their house. Leon noticed Riley's discomfort and looked at Lady Nani. Riley was convinced that the bishop had something nefarious in mind. When Lady Iris, the servants, Riley and Nani said goodbye to Rebosa, the bishop warmly invited them to visit him sometime, saying they were always welcome. Riley, anxious to get rid of him, promised that he would certainly come, although he had no such intention. Seeing the prince's mood, the bishop laughed and commented that Riley's temper had not changed. He thanked the nobles for their hospitality the night before. Lady Arras responded graciously, saying they were always happy to see him. Rebosa thanked her for her kindness before saying goodbye. As the carriage drove away, Riley and Nani watched intently. The prince commented that he could see through Rebosa. The girl was confused. Riley explained that, ostensibly, the bishop had come to check on his mother's chronic illness. But given that he spent most of his time talking to them, it was clear he had a different agenda. Nani held the box that the bishop had given her before leaving and asked if Rebosa's visit was related to what Saint Frisia had mentioned last time. Riley confirmed, remembering Frisia's prophecy about the dragon that would soon arrive in Solia and how he had been tasked with capturing it. He concluded that Rebosa had not come to check on his mother, but to deliver these gifts as a form of bribery. Nani was a little surprised. Riley explained it more simply. It's like receiving gingerbread. Once you eat it, you feel obligated to give back. He compared the situation to someone enjoying a sleigh ride and feeling compelled to make an effort for the sake of that pleasure. Nani pondered for a moment and suggested that the master wanted to introduce himself. Riley interrupted her, exclaiming that she was crazy. "Of course not. Why would I do something like that?" he asked. Nani replied that it was just her thought. Riley, clearly frustrated, lamented that he was tired of dealing with these saints. Suddenly the prince hesitated and told her to wait. He commented that she was different from the saint she had been in her previous life. Nani, totally confused, didn't understand what he meant. Riley was outraged, questioning why all this chaos had erupted since their arrival in Solia. Meanwhile, Nani, not paying much attention, discreetly stored the bribe box in her magical inventory bracelet. The third prince started to feel relieved, thinking that there would be no more problems for a while. However, Nani reprimanded him, warning that speaking like this was tempting fate and could lead to the opposite result. The prince did not like his gloomy prediction. Now, Riley and Nani were in the study of the Earl of Ipiet's father, Finn. Finn started the conversation by saying, "Okay, Riley, it looks like this girl is a sixth circle mage." Riley asked if Han had informed him yet. Her father shouted that the servant had only mentioned that she was a sorceress, but nothing about being from the sixth circle. Finn, calming down, commented that even though Asteroid was in the seventh circle, being in the sixth circle was still remarkable. He questioned why a sorceress of such caliber would serve as a servant. His words left Nani increasingly confused. Now, Count Ipiet addressed Nani directly, praising her as an excellent magician who managed to stop Asteroid. He noted that with her skill level, she could have secured a much better position and asked her to explain. Nani replied that she enjoyed living in the mansion and serving her family faithfully. She confidently stated that this was why she accepted the servant position. He added that he found something there that he had lost in the magic tower. There was a moment of silence as Nani and Finn exchanged glances. The Earl clenched his fist and acknowledged her words. Noting that she had followed Riley since she was a child, Nani confirmed this, stating seriously. Finn Ipiet then asked her what she thought of Riley. Both Riley and Nani were surprised by the question. But after some time, Nani laughed and said that he seemed like a good man. Finn was satisfied with his answer, and Nani happily asked if it could be otherwise. She seemed to radiate an exuberant energy, as if pink roses were blooming around her. Riley, however, felt uncomfortable with this image. He exclaimed, demanding to know what they were arguing about and the reason for the strange atmosphere. Nani then leaned over and explained that the sixth circle was just a result of her past, and now she wanted to live in the present. She closed her eyes, remembering that Frisia had predicted that she would only last until autumn. Realizing that he might not survive the summer, Nani looked at his master and understood that it was too late to change his fate. She wanted to spend what time she had left living a quiet, ordinary life. She convinced the Count that she was living a much happier life now than in her past as a sorceress. The Count asked if there was anything she was dissatisfied with. Nani assured her with a negative gesture and said that everyone treated her very well. This answer seemed to please Finn, who concluded that she was content with her situation. The prince commented that summer would soon begin, noting that the sun was already warming, but it was still spring. As usual, Riley put his hand behind his head and mentioned that this year he wanted to return to Rainfield. He then asked his father for permission to go. Meanwhile, Lloyd was in his brother's room, bombarding him with questions. "How is this possible?" demanded Lloyd. Leon, remaining silent, listened. Lloyd asked how Riley had obtained the medal. Leon speculated that there was probably a reason why Riley received the medal. The second prince, frustrated, shouted that he could no longer stand still. He insisted that they also needed to accomplish something significant. Only in this way, he believed, could they win the battle for inheritance. Leon agreed, recognizing that due to the events in Solia, Riley had become a serious contender for the inheritance. He was holding some papers, including a document about the hunt for a dark wizard last seen in Rainfield. He handed the papers to his younger brother, explaining that there was a dark wizard in Rainfield that they needed to capture. Lloyd, excited by the opportunity, eagerly suggested that they capture and kill the dark wizard. Leon, smiling because he knew his brother was up to something, asked him to wait a bit. He noted that summer would arrive soon, and Lloyd agreed, saying it would be hot in a few days. Leon realized why Riley wanted to go to Rainfield as soon as summer began. Their father granted Riley permission to go to Rainfield, which made Riley very excited. Nani, however, did not understand his reaction. Leon, plotting, thought it would be better if Riley never returned from Rainfield. Ian ran after the young prince, worried, and asked how long he would be gone. Riley hesitated and replied that he didn't know yet, estimating perhaps 3 weeks. Even this relatively short period horrified Ian. He asked why it would take so long. Riley laughed and reassured him, placing a hand on his shoulder and telling him not to worry, that they would be fine. Feeling a little relieved, Ian exhaled. Nani, wearing a yellow cloak, mentioned that she had created a communication channel in Lady Araz's hand mirror. She explained that, with magic, they could maintain frequent contact, so Ian shouldn't worry so much. Lady Iris laughed and thanked Nani, expressing confidence as Nani would be with her son. Nani was deeply moved by Lady Iris' words. Feeling a surge of emotion, she asked if they were ready to leave and sincerely wished them a safe trip. Sarah then turned to Nani, who listened carefully to his instructions. Suddenly, Lady Iris remembered something and ran to Nani, asking her to wait. Ian didn't expect that from the lady. Lady Iris handed Nani an object wrapped in a black cloth. Nani asked what it was. Iris smiled and said she didn't know if Nani would like it, but she had made it herself. He also asked Nani to look after Raleigh while he was on vacation. She explained that Raleigh used to wear the item, but had now adjusted it to suit Nani. Lady Iris admitted that she wasn't sure it would work for Nani. When Nani asked if Raleigh had used it, Lady Iris did not answer directly, but told her not to forget to unwrap it later, hoping she would like it. Nani held the gift tightly in her hands, thanking Lady Iris profusely and promising to take good care of the young master. Lady Iris smiled and said that in that case she would trust her. Raleigh felt relieved as he settled into the carriage, happy to escape the unbearable summer that was approaching. However, Yendel was not satisfied. He slapped his face and called Raleigh an idiot. Watching him disembark from the carriage and calling him crazy, Raleigh teased Yendel, asking if it was really that difficult for him to use the teleporter once, and joked that he could do it in the blink of an eye. Yendel, enraged, shouted at him, warning him not to awaken the beast within him in case Raleigh forgot he was a dragon. His eyes burning with rage, he threw a fireball at the prince. Raleigh dodged the attack with ease, although the fireball exploded behind him. Yendel's screams only further angered Raleigh, who crouched down. The third prince reassured Yendel, saying that he had anticipated such a reaction and promised to repay the debt. He then asked Yendel to teleport them after all. Yendel, calming down, offered to take Raleigh where he needed to go and give him something. He gestured towards Nani, who was busy tending to the horses. Raleigh firmly replied that Nani had her own desires and was not an object to be surrendered. He added that he would not give it to anyone. Looking at the cheerful girl, Raleigh noticed that she looked like him in some ways, perhaps like he used to be. This observation seemed strange but true to him. Yendel's laughter filled the air as he admitted that Raleigh had a point, even if he himself didn't fully understand it. Yendel asked if Raleigh was sure of this, and Raleigh confirmed, saying that Yendel should prepare to teleport them. Just as they were about to teleport, Yendel abruptly stopped Raleigh. Frustrated, Raleigh asked what else was wrong. The dragon started talking about Nani, referring to her as the prince's princess. He hesitated before asking how long she had left to live. Nani, sitting in the back of the carriage, could not hear their conversation. Yendel commented that it seemed like Raleigh knew everything. Raleigh confirmed, acknowledging that Nani was no ordinary person, and it would be strange if he didn't know. Yendel, worried, asked what Raleigh planned to do about it. Raleigh remained silent for a moment, thinking about the situation. Nani was alone, feeling that they were late for something. She remembered Lady Iris's gift. With Iris by her side, Nani took the package in her hands, pondering whether she should open it now. She began to unfold the black fabric, curious about its contents. Inside, he found a beautifully decorated mask, half white. Nani was stunned when she saw the mask. His trembling hand held the gift tightly as drops of water fell onto its flawless surface. Tears streamed down her face as she cried, deeply moved by Lady Iris' gift, and silently thanked her. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain and covered his mouth with his hand. He coughed, and blood appeared on his palm, forming a large, bright red puddle. She looked at her hand in shock, her eyes filling with more tears. Frasia's words echoed in her mind. She should survive this summer, and if she was lucky, she might make it to autumn. But Frisia had also said it would likely happen in early fall. Blood stained the area near her mouth, but she whispered to herself that she didn't care. Nani was genuinely happy as she held the mask made by Lady Iris. Suddenly, Raleigh called out to her, shouting that she was ready to come down. Frightened, Nani quickly joined her master. Before Yendel, Raleigh informed the dragon that she was with him. Yendel responded rudely, telling her to stop blabbering. He announced that if they were ready, he would begin. He pointed his hand at them, making a sweeping gesture, and said the word teleportation. They were enveloped by heavy rain as the space around them changed. Raleigh shouted, calling Yendel an idiot and asking why he had sent them there. Before them stood a giant monster, about 7 times taller than the prince, wielding a sword of comparable size. Raleigh asked Nani he was an ogre. Nani confirmed yes. Raleigh, exasperated, told Nani to look at what Yendel had done, sending them to such a dangerous place. The ogre opened its huge mouth and roared. The third prince, furious with the dragon, called him a crazy idiot. The ogre wasted no time and uprooted a large tree, preparing to attack the prince with it. Raleigh mocked the ogre, saying that he had only uprooted one tree and thought he was now the strongest. Nani, terrified, ran towards her master, but he told her to stay back, explaining that he could handle it alone. He advised her to put on a raincoat because it was raining heavily. Raleigh drew his mighty sword and smiled at Nani, saying he understood. Nani began to create a protective dome, asking him to be careful. Raleigh joked that he appreciated her concern. When the ogre threw the tree to the ground, Raleigh easily jumped over it, telling the monster to calm down. He asked the ogre what had provoked him so much and pointed his sword at the creature. warning that it would not survive. The ogre's eyes filled with even more anger as he prepared to attack. Riley teased the orc knowingly. The monster attacked, but Riley deftly dodged it. Undeterred, the orc swung the tree again and again, but Riley avoided each blow. The orc, growing increasingly furious, slammed the tree into the ground repeatedly. Steam came out of his mouth in fury, and the tree, after another powerful blow, split in half, leaving a crater in the earth. Riley sighed, exasperated. He just wanted some quiet fun, but this was too much. He flew directly towards the orc, questioning the purpose of the teleportation. With a quick blow, the prince cut the monster in half, causing it to fall to the ground. The orc let out a final sigh as he collapsed. Riley raised his hand, and the monster within him roared, screaming in pain. Naney stood there, stunned. Riley, now covered in blood, swore loudly. His head, face and clothes were splattered with the monster's blood. He angrily commented that he had wasted time washing before leaving, blaming Yendel for bringing them here on purpose. He questioned how else he could explain his current situation. Naney rushed to Riley, suggesting he use magic to clean the blood. She cast a purification spell, sending her mana towards him. However, the magic had the opposite effect, leaving black, oil-like stains on his face. Riley was horrified, while Naney was equally shocked by the unexpected result. Naney tried to reassure him, saying it was just dirt, nothing disgusting. Riley, frustrated, asked how dirt could be considered not disgusting. Suddenly, the orc began to move. Naney shouted that the monster was getting up, and Riley was surprised to see it get up again. The prince asked Naney who she thought had caused the orc's resurrection. The girl offered to handle it alone this time. Riley, still frustrated, allowed her to try. Naney quickly enveloped the orc with her purple mana, completely erasing it. She suggested that Riley put his hand in the dirt, and he agreed. Meanwhile, a small man with a red ponytail on his head appeared, standing on a tree branch. Riley asked where they were. Naney consulted a map and asked him to wait. She explained that there were no signs in the area, making it difficult to pinpoint her exact location. She then turned to Riley, explaining that she had used search magic and sensed someone nearby. Riley, surprised, suggested they go there, as they had no other option. Naney agreed, but suddenly, the orc reappeared, seemingly out of nowhere, his eyes blazing with rage. Now he was smaller, but no less furious. Riley sighed, realizing the fight wasn't over. But before they could react, they were surrounded by local warriors. Among them was the red-haired man, each holding a bow. Riley asked who they were, noting that he had been coming to Rainfield for several years, but had never seen them before. The red-haired man shouted at him not to feign ignorance. Shouting, the red-haired warrior declared that they had seen everything. He turned to Naney, accusing her. Magic came out of your hands. It was black magic, wasn't it? Naney, surprised by the accusation of being a black mage, intervened, asking what they were talking about. The rain fell on them as another warrior shouted that the dark mage, who had been wandering around Rainfield lately, was indeed her. He added that she shouldn't even bother making excuses. The warriors insisted that they had seen dark magic flowing from their hands, considering this irrefutable proof. One girl among them mentioned hearing that she had used purification magic. They questioned whether she realized that she had corrupted the magic, turning it into dark magic. Riley was astonished by his conclusions. A laugh escaped him as he marveled at the complexity of the situation. He looked seriously at the warriors and asked what they were talking about in regards to another black mage. A green-haired warrior shouted at him to stop making excuses, accusing him of being in league with her. This accusation deeply angered Riley, his veins swelling with rage. Furious, he warned the warrior not to point his weapon at him. Riley emitted a deadly aura that terrified the red-haired warrior, who had not expected such a reaction. Riley asked the warriors, trying to contain his fury, if they truly believed that he and Naney were involved in dark magic. Calming down, the prince stated that they should be outraged as local warriors were about to kill them based on false accusations. One of the warriors asked the other what was happening, to which the other replied that he felt an oppressive aura. Riley pressured them to answer his questions correctly. Another warrior shouted that Naney's mana was black. Riley replied, "And what does it matter if her mana is dark?" The red-haired warrior pointed at Naney, stating that black mana was an unmistakable sign of all black mages. The third prince turned to Naney and asked if it was true that all black mages had black mana. Naney shook her head, denying the statement. Riley then addressed the red-haired warrior, stating that his statement was incorrect. The man, now frightened, asked what Riley meant by that. Riley explained that Naney's dark mana was a unique trait, not inherent. He then asked the red-haired warrior to explain more about why they believed she was a dark mage. When the man hesitated, Riley pressed him further, demanding to know if they had any concrete evidence. Seeing the warrior's uncertainty, Riley declared that they should think carefully before making such accusations. He emphasized that Naney's dark mana was the result of experiments, not indicative of dark magic. He urged the warriors to reconsider their position and respond thoughtfully. Riley, speaking languidly, declared that he could swear by his surname, the wizard Ipiet, and then asked what they, the local warriors, could swear by. The local warriors were surprised. One whispered that they were in trouble, while another realized that this ally of a supposed black magician was, in fact, of noble blood. The redhead was also shocked and questioned what a noble was doing in his area. Riley continued, saying that he was unfamiliar with how things worked in Rainfield, but insulting the nobility could at least result in imprisonment. He explained that he was there on vacation, looking for a peaceful rest. He demanded to know why they were there when they didn't even know who he and Nani were or why they were there. The redhead's surprise increased with each word. Without waiting for a response, Riley declared that he would fulfill their wishes. He drew his sword and declared that he would do what a true black magician would do: kill all the witnesses and move on. Nani was shocked by his statements and begged her master to wait. Nani shouted that the warriors would understand if she and Riley explained their situation. The wind blew his hair back, revealing his half-damaged face. The warriors murmured among themselves, wondering what had happened to his face. Nani faced them directly, asking them to listen to her. The redhead, now revealed to be a girl, began to cry uncontrollably, covering his mouth with his hand. Horrified by what she saw, she lamented the horrors of Solia's Tower of Magic. She cursed Astroy and expressed her regret, furiously apologizing and asking how it was possible that Nani had fallen prey to such horrors. The red-haired girl begged for forgiveness, admitting her mistake with tears streaming down her face. Nani, also tearful, handed her a towel, telling her to take it and use it. The girl thanked Nani. Riley, watching disapprovingly, commented that he was prepared to kill them a moment ago. He added that what bothered him most was that her crying reminded him of someone. Nani began to say what was on her mind, and the prince remembered the face of an old man who was crying from the pain and sadness he experienced in Solia. Riley let Nani finish her sentence, confirming that it was Ian. The girl finally stood up, and the other two warriors began to bow. Riley asked if they now realized they were wrong. The local warriors recognized their mistake and apologized to Lord Riley for their rudeness. The third prince laughed, pointing out that he had told them that 5 minutes ago, but they didn't believe him. He asked what had changed now. One of the warriors explained that his commander had never been mistaken before. Initially confused, he then admitted that the commander's intuition was generally correct. The commander, the red-haired girl, looked away with tears in her eyes. The warrior assured them that they could now remain calm, as they no longer suspected them of wrongdoing. Riley then asked about the identity of the black magician they were referring to. The warrior explained that this black magician had gained notoriety long ago, and that recently, traces of him had been found near Rainfield. The red-haired girl looked sad as the warrior spoke. He then remembered that he had a pamphlet with a description of the wizard and a reward for his capture. He offered to show it to the aristocrats. Riley took the pamphlet and read it aloud, noting the mage's characteristic dark mana and ability to control the bodies of dead creatures. One of the warriors clarified that they were trying to capture him. Another warrior reiterated the wizard's power over the corpses, and the red-haired girl confirmed this. Her head bowed in sadness. She explained that her father had been a victim of this criminal. Riley, astonished, asked if he had heard correctly that the wizard could actually control corpses. The girl stated, starting to explain that he was the reason her father died. However, another warrior interrupted, asking if they could hear something approaching. Everyone turned to see the same ogre, dead twice already, staggering towards them, covered in scars and wounds. Nani shouted a warning to Riley, who readied her sword once more. The prince, unfazed, seriously injured the ogre once again. The red-haired commander and the two warriors were amazed at Riley's strength. Meanwhile, deeper into the forest, a figure in a black cloak watched the scene, muttering about the difficulties of finding suitable corpses to control. Frustrated, the black mage muttered to himself, wondering why the ogre was being ungrateful after being saved. When he disappeared into the forest, he decided to find a creature similar to a basilisk for his purposes. Back at the battle site, the ogre was finally defeated. Nani was holding an umbrella over herself and Riley, who was reveling in her victory and enjoying the refreshing rain. Nani suggested throwing a shield to protect herself from the rain, but Riley refused, finding the experience of sharing an umbrella in a downpour romantic. Suddenly, the red-haired girl reappeared, happily noting that they hadn't said goodbye yet and could now be together. Riley, however, did not seem pleased to see her again. She commented that she was surprised to learn that the hero she had heard about was now working for them as a butler. Riley retorted that he was surprised to see her upset and crying like Ian. The girl, feeling embarrassed, asked him to forget, admitting that she felt ashamed of her previous behavior. He handed them a piece of paper, explaining that he now owed them a debt and that they should have at least that amount. The redhead smiled and added that since they had been there for a month, they were welcome to visit any time, and he would treat them to a delicious lunch. Riley took the paper and said, "Great, As they said goodbye, the girl wished them a happy holiday and hoped they had fun. Nani and Rolly set off, walking under an umbrella in the pouring rain. Nani commented that many things had happened, but they still managed to reach their destination. A city stretched out before them. Rolly was satisfied and looked at his companion with a smile. Nani commented that, as the saying goes, after black comes white. She also felt happy in the fresh air. Riley was delighted. He smiled and declared that their long-awaited real vacation was finally beginning. Riley suggested that Nani decide where they should go and begin their journey. Nani was already wearing the mask that Lady Iris had given her, apparently lost in thought. She didn't immediately realize what Riley wanted. Riley guessed she was saying she was hungry and said she knew it. They needed to eat first. The third prince snatched the umbrella from Nani's hands and happily announced that it was time to try the region's traditional dish. Nani was a little surprised and even scared by his behavior. She didn't even know what pigeon pancakes were. The order was ready and placed on the table. Nani looked at the food with some displeasure, while Riley was happy that it was finally cooked. When he saw them, he exclaimed that they could eat them. He urged Nani to try it. She looked at the plate in disgust and asked if that vomit was meant to be eaten. Riley, surprised, asked what she meant. With an expression of disbelief, he ordered her to immediately apologize to the pancake fans on a rainy day. Nani wondered what he was talking about. The prince said she hadn't even tried it yet, advising her to eat first and judge later. He warned her not to ask for more when she was done. Reluctantly, Nani looked at the stack of pancakes and picked up her chopsticks. She expressed her gratitude but said it wasn't something she was used to eating. Riley stopped her, insisting she try it. Eventually, Nani put the food in her mouth. The taste surprised her. She had probably never tasted such a delicious meal. She was so enchanted and amazed that it seemed as if roses were blooming everywhere. Nani exclaimed, asking what that was. Now relaxed, Riley asked how she was doing and if she was okay. Still wide-eyed with surprise, Nani replied that it was delicious. Riley said it was his turn, deftly picking up the noodles with his chopsticks. He was so happy to eat pancakes again that it felt like fireworks were going off around him. The prince remembered the past, saying that it reminded him of the old days when he often ate pancakes. Nani, curious, asked when that time was and what he meant by old times. Riley poured some sake and told her not to worry about it, suggesting that now was a good time to drink it. Nani held a cup of sake in his hands, looking at it suspiciously. She asked if it was alcohol. Riley remained silent, and Nani continued, saying that Master Sars advised her not to get drunk. Riley, feeling irritated, noticed his hesitation. Realizing he wasn't denying it, Nani concluded it must be alcohol. The prince reassured her, saying it wouldn't hurt and encouraged her to drink. Nani replied that it was not about doing harm, but about respecting Lady Aras's wishes. Riley, once again, interrupted her, insisting that she try it, assuring her that it would do no harm. With a bit of disdain, Nani finally took a sip and was surprised to find that the sake was very tasty. Riley smiled. See? Nani then drank the entire glass. The prince was amazed. This was not what he expected from her. She took one sip after another, and Riley even had to stop her. Nani happily placed the cup back on the table and loudly exclaimed that it was incredibly delicious. Riley, initially surprised, then relaxed. They were sitting at a table near the window, listening to the sounds outside. Riley looked out the window, but realized the sounds were coming from a nearby table. A man in black robes was sitting there, sloppily eating his bread, chewing and coughing. He was shoving a loaf of bread into his mouth, which Riley found quite unpleasant as it ruined the atmosphere. The man ate carelessly, muttering to himself, "More, more, more." Displeased, Riley stood up and asked Nani if she had finished her meal, suggesting it was time to leave. Nani, delighted, followed Riley. As they left, Riley looked at the man in black robes, relieved that he wouldn't have to see him again. The doors closed behind them. The man finished his meal and collapsed tiredly into the chair. A waiter approached and politely asked how he would pay. Apparently, the man had forgotten to pay. The waiter reminded him, saying that he could not act in gratitude by not paying. The waiter, still in a good mood, began to declare the amount of the bill. However, the man didn't let him finish. Instead, a black-gloved palm hit the waiter in the face. The man in the robe, with a sinister tone, said that he was sorry that only one had been captured there, implying that he intended to create a puppet. Darkness enveloped everything around him, empty plates, tables, the entire room. The waiter hung limply on the wizard's arm. The man scoffed, "Here's your payment. Take it." The poor waiter could only scream in response as blood splashed onto the stone floor.